continue to support the Rotary Foundation and End Polio Now. Looking around, looking at the names coming on, I'm speaking to the converted, I know that. So I hope this will just strengthen your commitment, and I'll give you some very up-to-date information on where we are with End Polio Now. That's going to be the main part of what I do. Okay, so I'm going to do this by PowerPoint, so I'm going to share my screen, which we hope is going to work. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, I just need to start the slideshow. Right, so you should see the slideshow now. Is that okay? Yep, okay, good. Yep. Right. So why do we give to Foundation and End Polio Now? And I hope that that'll come out in the discussion once I've finished. So the mission of the Rotary Foundation is the same as when it was founded, to do good in the world. It hasn't changed. And that's the mission up there for you. That's to enable us to advance world understanding, goodwill and peace through the improvement of health, the support of education and the alleviation of poverty. It's a strong and clear purpose. So I thought you might be interested in the accounts for the last year. So for 2018-19, the foundation had income of 360 million. So that's approximately $1 million per day. So this is a big charity. And you can see the expenditure. The great majority of the expenditure goes on programs and projects. And just note that very small amount on administration and fund development, around 10%. That is way better than comparable major charities. And that's an important point. So where does that money come from? Well, primarily from us. A few rich Rotarians may give 6 or even 7-figure sums, but most of us are like us. And me, I give £10 a month, and I'm sure many of you do as well. Because there are 1.2 million of us, we can give a little, and it adds up. As you know, the Rotary Foundation asks us to give $100 per year per Rotarian. That can come from individuals, it can come from clubs, and many clubs do it through club donations. Obviously, bequests and legacies gifts speaks for itself. But just note that in that year, last Rotary year, the Gates Foundation gave us 100 million for End Polio Now, which is about 1/3 of the foundation's income from that year. So the Gates Foundation support is huge, and we should be very, very grateful for that. So how do we use all that money then? Well, as you know, there's a myth that the Rotary Foundation is difficult and complicated. And of course it isn't. It does just 4 things. It gives global grants to Rotarians, Rotary clubs for projects. It gives district grants to districts who then give it to clubs for projects. It funds the peace centres directly, which train young professionals in peace and conflict resolution. And it funds its biggest and most essential priority, polio eradication. And you can see that 151 million, that's 50 million from us and 100 million from the Gates Foundation. And that represents a half of the foundation's activity. So it just puts into perspective what a big project polio eradication is. But you also see how much is spent also on other humanitarian and educational projects. So it's not complicated, it's not difficult. We put in money and the money comes back to fund projects, to fund the peace centres and to fund polio eradication. And just to remind you of the areas of focus, there used to be 6, there are now 7, and improving the environment has been added as a new area of focus. And you will not be surprised about that. And the foundation takes the view that the environment has very many humanitarian consequences. And the idea is that improving the environment under foundation will result in improvements in lifestyle and life expectation for people. So why should we give to the Rotary Foundation? Well, I hope I've made the point. It's ours. It's run by us, for our projects. It's efficient and it's well run and it's run with integrity. We put the money in and the money goes to where it's meant to go. There is no or very little leakage. And it does good to the tune of $1 million a day. So we have something to be hugely proud of that we must continue to support. So I'm going to go on to polio eradication now, because that's what I was asked specifically to focus on, and it is still the Foundation and Rotary International's #1 priority. You will know as well as I do that with COVID-19, we see what happens with a contagious virus when people are unprotected. If we stop vaccinating against polio, the same thing will happen. There will be widespread return of this disease, estimated to be up to 200,000 cases a year if we weren't vaccinating. And COVID makes the point. So that can't be allowed to happen. We started it and we need to make sure that it's finished. I recently heard Rotary described as the conscience of the global partnership for polio eradication. Other partners, such as the World Health Organization just now, obviously have many priorities, but we make sure that polio remains on everybody's agenda. So you know where we came from. I don't need to labor that. 350,000 cases in 1988. And there's the up-to-date position as of this morning when I checked. And that table has become very simple. We have just 2 countries where there is wild polio virus circulating, and we have tiny, tiny, tiny numbers of cases. All these numbers are negligible in the context of starting from 350,000. You can see we had a bit of a blip in Pakistan in 2019, and that is being dealt with, and the numbers are coming down again. So those are very, very good numbers, but they're not zero. And until they're zero, then this remains our priority. So there's just the key facts. Eradication is possible. Sometimes we doubt it, but we don't need to. It's possible. And there is an end game to get us there for 2023. That has gone back further than we wanted, but it's still there as a target date. We've already saved 18 million people from polio. That's a big achievement. But to complete the whole deal, we have to continue to vaccinate 450 million children a year in the at-risk countries. So that's the challenge. And that's Rotary's role in the partnership, to continue to fund vaccinations. And of course, we have the Gates Foundation funding at 2-to-1, and you've seen the financial implications of that in the financial figures that I showed earlier. There's the end game strategy. I'm not going to go all through of that. If you want more information on all of that, we can maybe deal with that in the questions later on. But those are the steps that the partnership have set out very clearly that will take us through to the certification of the world as polio free and the end of Rotary's role in this for the future. So we've had some successes recently, quite interestingly. We have fewer cases in fewer areas, in fewer countries than ever before. The programme is becoming more sophisticated. We're reaching more children with improved coverage and innovative strategies. More women are involved, and that's critical in working with communities. It's women who decide whether children get vaccinated, and therefore women in the front line have greater possibility of success. Surveillance systems are improving. This is about track and trace. Track and trace is in the news a lot. Polio is based on a track and trace system. And I'll come back to the significance of that for other countries in a minute. And importantly, we have this new vaccine imminently available. Just briefly, turn my page here. If you follow the news reports, you'll see reports of cases of polio outside of Pakistan and Afghanistan. If you see these, they're cases of vaccine-derived polio. The attenuated live virus used in oral polio vaccines has evolved an ability to mutate in the environment and cause polio in communities with poor vaccination rates. This is very, very rare. Compared with the hundreds of millions of vaccinations a year, the number of instances of vaccine-derived polio is tiny, but it's not zero. So a US and UK partnership of virologists are designing a new vaccine which is incapable of evolving and mutating in this way. This new vaccine is in advanced clinical trials, and there's a plan to manufacture millions of doses for later this year. This is a huge, important step in getting to full eradication. It's been funded by the Gates Foundation, and it will eliminate the risk of vaccine-derived polio. And interestingly, this work is highly relevant to the search for a coronavirus vaccine, and there is collaboration over it. Again, can say more about that later on if you're interested. And of course, we have had one huge major success recently, and that is the certification of Africa as wild polio virus free. And from what I read, this was achieved primarily through track and trace, through sophisticated track and trace systems, that every case that popped up was tracked, traced, and the surrounding area fully immunized. So that's a huge success, following on from India being certified 10 years ago. Seems to go in decades. 2010 was India, 2020 is the whole of Africa. So we should be very, very pleased about that. We have some continuing challenges. They're set out there. In Afghanistan and Pakistan, we're dealing with remote communities. The vaccine has to be kept cold. There's cross-border population movement. There's insecurity and conflict. And there has been community resistance from the Taliban, although the Pakistan government have worked really, really hard to deal with that. And of course, there's now COVID. And you will not be surprised to hear that initially polio immunization was suspended in many of the target countries. For obvious reasons, the immunization process is interpersonal, it needs house-to-house visits, travel to remote locations, and therefore it's not safe for health workers. And of course, some governments did divert resources to COVID response, understandably. However, I am told, as of this morning, that activity is resuming and that the polio immunization program will be compensated for any transfer of resources from polio to COVID response in due course. So we have had a downturn, but it hasn't yet showed up in the cases. The cases have not shot up, so we have to feel positively about that. But there is a big plus side to COVID and polio. You often hear the campaign called Polio Plus, and that's because of the investment that takes place in health systems, infrastructure, laboratories, training, distribution networks. All of these have long-term benefits for poorer countries. These very investments are helping countries deal with coronavirus. Community healthcare workers who do polio vaccination also give information and support with COVID. Polio workers distribute soap and masks and advise communities about COVID. So there is a real plus here that is helping countries deal with polio. And I picked this quote up on the website this morning. The polio structure in Nigeria has made the response to any disease outbreak quicker and more focused. Because we have people who are already knowledgeable from the grassroots to the national level, we can equip them to respond. That was why Nigeria was able to defeat Ebola. There were only 19 cases of Ebola in Nigeria because of the investment in polio. And it's why Nigeria is also able to fight COVID-19. The world has Rotary International to thank for this. And that's a really nice statement to read, because it shows that although we have not yet completed eradication fully, we have done a huge amount of good along the way. And I'm really pleased that other countries are able to fight COVID effectively because of what we've done. So what should we do? We should stay optimistic and resilient. We will finish this. There is an endgame strategy, and there is always good news. Be proud of what we are doing. There are 18 million people on the planet who would have been paralyzed by polio without what Rotary has done since 1985. And as I've said, countries are benefiting from our investment in their health systems. So let's continue to support and fund it. We're not asked to give much, less than £1 a week. Clubs make a lot of charitable donations. Please don't forget our own organisation and try and keep it as one of your club's priorities. Purple for Polio is alive and well in our IBI. There's loads of resources and ideas on the website, so I'm not going to go over them now. I saw loads of evidence of clubs going purple for World Polio Day all over Facebook, which is really, really nice to see. And it shows how much support there is. So thanks for all of that. Let's keep it going for the rest of the year and into next year. So I hope I've persuaded you that we have something really special in the foundation and really important in the campaign to eradicate polio. So let's keep it going. And as I said, I'm sure that I've preached to the converted, and so I'd be really, really pleased to hear what other people have to say about it. And obviously I'll certainly try and answer any questions. And I'm now going to try and escape from this PowerPoint and come back and see you. Ah, there we are.
Thanks, Janet. That was great. Really
Okay.
great. I think I need to remove you from the spotlight.
Yes, please.
Keep you in the hot seat, perhaps. There we go. So people should be able to get back to gallery view now. I was really interested. I thought, particularly as you were speaking, you know, now that we've got this, which nobody would ever want, that literally first-hand experience of the pandemic that we've got just now. I think we have a frame of understanding about things like test and trace that we just never did before. There's a relevance to it, you know, which we would never have wished for, but I think it definitely hits home, and an amazing achievement so far. It's keeping up the momentum, isn't it, to make sure that we get to where we've always been trying to go. So yeah, I'll just open it up for questions, folks. Oh, Sandy's got his hand up already. And I've got a couple of other questions already. The wee blue hand is great if you know how to do it. I've got you across 2 screens. So if you're waving with your physical hand, I will keep looking, but the little blue hand is great. So we've got 2 hands up, and Sandy, to go first, please.
Yeah, that was lovely, Janet. Thank you very much. And it's a while since I've had an update on the polio project, so it's really good to see the latest figures. But one thing that's troubling me a little bit is the end game 2023. But you say we're inoculating 450 million kids a year. How long are we going to be doing this for? I mean, we're all tied into this polio. We've been indoctrinated in it for years. We're not going to walk away from this. We're going to keep supporting it. But for how long shall we continue to support it?
It's a very good question, Sandy, and it's one that I ask whenever I get to talk to the experts. And what I am told is that the expectation is that in 2023, the World Health Organization will certify the world as polio-free. It's the WHO that does that. And they will do that when they are satisfied that there is no further transmission of the wild polio virus in the environment, and we have eliminated these vaccine-derived polio cases. At that point, when the world is certified polio-free, Rotary's role ends. That's our job. That's job done for us. Now, will vaccinations against polio continue? Well, of course they will. Our own health system will continue to vaccinate our children. Of course we will.
Yes.
And the medics estimate that could take 5 to 10 years. But that would be the responsibility of governments. That kind of safety net vaccination that will continue. Yeah. Rotary's job will be done when the world is certified polio-free. And then it becomes an international World Health Organization responsibility. And the end game strategy obviously does involve the careful and safe preservation of vaccine, so that should the impossible happen, and should there be a case after certification, there will still be vaccine available, and obviously measures could be taken. But we in Rotary need to keep our focus on getting to that certification, and once the world is certified polio free, we've done our job.
Thanks, Janet.
Okay,
I think
thank
that's
you.
really useful. I've heard that question come up before, and I think you've put that across really concisely. So many thanks for that, and thanks for the question, Sandy. So we'll go to Kerry Muir now. Philip?
Thank you, Janet. Very interesting. Sort of building on the bit where you talked about COVID having an impact on how polio approaches to vaccinating and everything has worked. I just wondered, my understanding is that polio is highly contagious and lives in the throat like COVID. I just wondered whether you've got any idea what the R number is, because we hear it for COVID, and I wondered whether that would put it in perspective.
No, it's not something that's calculated for polio, mainly because it's transmitted in a different way. COVID is transmitted person to person. So if I've got it and I sneeze on you, you get it. If I've got polio, the virus is living in my intestines, in my gut, and it's going to go into the sewage system. And then it may be picked up by lots of other people or no people, but they would not be possible to trace it directly to me. So there's not the same person to person transmission. One person could infect nobody or quite a lot, depending on the water environment, the sanitation environment that they're living in. So, however, the laboratories, when a case arises of actual paralysis, then the strain that caused that is identified in the laboratories, and they can track back to where it came from and which village or which community. So there are those kinds of track and trace happening, but the R number can't be calculated in the same way because the transmission methodology is not the same.
Oh, that makes sense. I was trying to just get a handle on the very small numbers and what it meant, but that explains that. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Great answer again, Janet. Jennifer, you have a question.
Well, it's really just to carry on about the eradication of polio. It's like smallpox. There is no intermediate animal host. So once polio is eradicated, it will end up like smallpox, totally gone, except for laboratories.
Yeah.
Once there is no more human to human transmission or human transmission through the sewage system, that'll be it, gone.
That's absolutely right, Jennifer, and that's where we're heading with towards certification of the world as polio free, because it had been so widespread and because it can survive in the environment. Obviously, there has to be a plan B just in case, but the expectation is that it will become a thing of the past, like smallpox. Absolutely. And none of us get smallpox vaccinations now. Nobody ever gets a smallpox vaccination. So the time will come when all of the stocks of the vaccine will be destroyed.
And is that what we hear in the context of COVID, because that herd immunity evolves? You know, we evolve as we become resistant, and therefore the need for the vaccine then goes away over time. Is it that kind of similar evolution, Janet?
Yes, and again, polio is different from COVID because, of course, it's the exact opposite of COVID, and it affects children. It affects children specifically, and it is fatal or cause paralysis in a relatively small percentage of cases. So if people contract polio, quite often they get relatively mild symptoms. In fact, the majority of people, and almost all adults, get mild symptoms. It affects children specifically and to different degrees of seriousness, obviously. And so in that regard, it's the opposite. Once you have had polio, then you do get immunity. You do have immunity, but of course you don't get better. So for children, immunity's no use. Immunity, having had the disease, is no use at all. So the strategy is a little bit different for that reason.
Understood. Thanks for that. Thank you. I don't see any other hands waving at me quite yet. So actually, polio was something I knew very little about before getting involved with Rotary. Sorry about the whiny dog before getting involved with Rotary. And obviously you learn about that as you go. But one of the things, two things that have come to my attention more recently are, one of them you were talking about tonight, which was the vaccine related polio. Yeah. And the other one, which I've heard speakers talk about, usually people who have had polio have polio, that whole legacy of other health conditions that then come from polio. I was quite taken aback by both of those things, which I think just really reinforces the need to do something about it. But the fact that, you know, because there have been so many polio sufferers, both of these issues could still go on for some time.
Yes, there is post-polio syndrome. There's a post-polio syndrome. People who contract the disease and don't die will have lifelong effects from it. And of course, we are seeing at least some evidence of that with COVID, that some people have post-COVID syndrome and have serious health effects after recovering from the main part of the illness. So there are comparisons there as well. And, you know, we've had speakers with post-polio syndrome, and it's very serious. So if you don't die from it, then the consequences are still serious. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Janet. And Janet, you posed a question, didn't you, towards the end of your presentation, where you wanted to hear, I think, from clubs really, about what was happening and what the views were. And was there anything specifically that you had in mind, or was it just to get a sense of really the views of clubs and the ongoing commitment of clubs around End Polio Now?
When I saw loads of good stuff, anybody on Facebook would have seen lots of really, really good things around World Polio Day. So clearly there's lots of support. But I'll be interested to hear from clubs as to whether it's still a priority, whether it's difficult to persuade Rotarians to continue to contribute, whether there's still real commitment to it, and, you know, what can we do to continue to encourage clubs to commit to it, because not all clubs do pay into polio now.
Thanks, Janet. That's great. So we'll keep rolling because we've got some hands waving again, I think, in response to that and other questions. So we have David from Inverurie first, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Janet. It was very interesting. I must confess, I've got egg on my face. When I heard the news that Africa was free of the wild polio virus, I mistakenly assumed that Africa was free of polio. And I was disappointed to learn that there's a couple of hundred cases of polio still there and in other parts of the world. And they're all this circulating stuff that you were talking about. Yeah. So the news that you've given us tonight, that there's a vaccine on the way is great news. Yes. But I just wonder if Rotary might have shot itself in the foot. Is anybody else under the impression, as I was, that Africa and polio, they don't exist together? Because they do.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I watched the news coverage when Polio Free Africa was announced, and certainly the BBC had it absolutely right. They very specifically said it's wild polio virus free. Now, to go on at that level of news and try to explain to the public about the vaccine-derived polio is complicated. And so the news has tended not, the general news has tended not to cover it, although there is plenty of good quality information in the newspapers if you read the detailed reports. But that is exactly the case. There will still be some cases of vaccine-derived polio in Africa. We need to keep it in context. These are still tiny numbers. And every time there is a case, then there is an immediate response. So if a case crops up, there have been one or two in the Horn of Africa, in Somalia, Ethiopia, that area. if a case of vaccine-derived polio is identified, there is an immediate response, a massive inoculation program around that area to make sure that it's knocked on the head and doesn't spread any further. So there is a strategic response to it to make sure that it's dealt with. But in the end, the trick is to get a vaccine where it doesn't happen. And as I said, we're at advanced clinical trials for that. And it's expected to be in use by the end of the year in millions of doses. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has funded that quite separately and in addition to the money they've given us. You know, it just shows that their commitment. So that problem is going to go away, but you're quite right that it does exist still at the moment. And the news coverage of polio-free Africa was very specifically correct about it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Good question as well, David. And I think the answers probably helped more than yourself in terms of Janet's response, just in terms of the clarity. Thanks for that. Alistair R, were you looking to come in? Oh, no.
Hi.
There you go.
Right, thanks, Heather. 3 points, really. Janet was asking what we were doing, but I wanted to start with something. One of the things about these meetings is that I keep seeing younger Rotarians. So the number of Rotarians that, like me, went to school during the polio crisis in this country is so much fewer. And really there isn't the hand-on experience or memory of how awful it was and losing friends and having friends who are disabled because of it. So it needs Rotary to keep the world aware, or the world in Great Britain aware of what's going on. I think one of the difficulties that's brought on by the COVID lockdown and so on is fundraising. I think every club will be losing thousands and thousands of thousands of potential income because the events aren't able to be held, and we need to find new ways. Last weekend, our club ran a quiz on Zoom, and for very little effort on behalf of most of the members, a lot of effort on behalf of about 2 of them, quickly made well over £200. That's dedicated to polio, that it was on the weekend of the polio day. And most of you are aware that our club, and myself in particular, have been banging on about the swim marathon every February for years and years and years. Well, I'm going to continue to do that, and I'm delighted to say that the 1010 vision in November will feature that, but a much changed style of it, because you won't be able to have crowds in swimming pools and so on. So the idea is going to be to encourage clubs to run what was the swim marathon, but where pools are open, people get sponsored £1 for every 10 lengths they swim during the whole month of February. And if you don't want to swim, you try and get sponsored for £1 for every mile you walk during February. And we're hoping that if all the clubs can get behind that, or a lot of clubs, we can make sure that our district maintains its excellent performance in donating money to polio. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair, and that was really great as well. The update about some of that alternative thinking, sort of COVID proofing, and also swim proofing. If you're me, because I'm definitely safer and more effective as a walker than a swimmer. Now, this Bob, you've been waiting for a while to come in, so would you like to come in? I can see everybody else who's got a blue hand up. If you haven't got a blue hand up but you want to come in, put it in the chat for me. Thanks.
Hi, Heather. We're just doing what I guess most of you are all doing in a small way. We some time ago we had the purple jam, which was very nice, and we're still selling the purple boiled sweets. And in Kirriemuir we have this very long-standing, ancient, maybe 100 years old sweetie shop, which has taken some of the purple sweets. So it's like what Tesco says, every little helps.
Absolutely. I've just said something very similar in the chat, because of course one of the themes that was coming out of the chat was, you know, cost of Rotary and asking people, and but I think a lot of it is just, as Janet said, you know, those little things. you know, a pound here and there and the happy pound, you know, the pound raffle. And I mean, sustaining members at £5 a month, if we can bring other costs down, plus fundraising activities of the type that Alistair was just talking about. As you say, Janet, it just accumulates, doesn't it?
Yeah, because there are so many of us that people don't personally do not have to give huge amounts. No. Those who can afford should give personally. Otherwise, club fundraising and all sorts of other ways of doing it. Nobody should feel that they have to give personally. There's lots of other ways it can be done.
Absolutely. I mean, that's not what's been asked for. It's the commitment and the focus, isn't it, on End Polio Now and our own charity. Absolutely. John from Pitlochry.
Hi, Janet. I, as always, enjoyed what you said about the foundation. Just one, probably what seems like a minor point, but technical issue. With sending in probably the annual club donation to foundation, I think I've done it 3 times. I'm not really aware of ever getting a receipt or an acknowledgement for doing that. Kind of feels as if you're sending a check and you don't know if it's been, well, you do know if it's been cashed eventually. I think it would be nice to get some sort of acknowledgement, and from the accounting point of view, we really should have a receipt to show for audit purposes.
Okay, I mean, I can't answer for RIBI, obviously. All our donations to Foundation and End Polio Now are processed by Rotary Foundation UK in Ulster, alongside RIBI. I'm sure they would say that with a very small staff, issuing receipts when they're dealing with so many payments would be difficult. But I would argue that you can follow through on your donation, in that if you go onto the Rotary International website and look at the club administration and go into the reports, then you will be able to see on a month-by-month basis the donations to Foundation and End Polio Now quite separately credited to your club. So if you were to say send a cheque for £200 in November, then you're going to have to give them a little while to process that. By December, you should be able to go into the website, into the reports, and see that £200 credited to your club. It will be there. So although you do not get a specific receipt, you can get documentary confirmation that the money has been credited to your club and is there.
Heather, I think, Heather, Mike in Aberdeen here.
Oh, hi, Mike.
I think, if I'm right in saying this, that the people who can access these donations in RIBI is limited to the secretary of the club for the year. It's not open to everybody to go in and look. You can look on your own name and get what you have put in, but you won't get the clubs, because I think, I'm fairly sure it is purely the secretary that's allowed access to that account.
I believe it's a little wider than that, Philip. I think it's the president, the secretary, the treasurer, and for foundation, if you have a foundation chair registered with RI, then the foundation chair also has access. And I know that simply because when I was foundation chair for my club, I had access. So
that's my understanding.
It's the club officers, secretary, president, secretary, treasurer, and foundation chair for foundation.
And executive. Was one.
Thanks. Gary, Ethan Valley.
Yes, Janet, good evening. Thanks again for that. It was a good reminder for all of us. A couple of things occurred to me from a couple of things we said recently. Is I, be honest, didn't realise that 2023 was the end date. I didn't realise that had been cast in stone. And so the challenge we've got now is keeping this relevant for the last few years. Linking to what you were saying about us, it's not just Rotarians giving money, it's fundraising and so on. I wonder if there's a case for Foundation to go and think about some sort of drive or some sort of presentation that we could use in communities to actually sort of sell the relevance of what this is all about.
Yeah, I think Great question, isn't it? And particularly, I think, I mean, it would be interesting. It would be interesting to get a sense from those on the call just about that whole point, as you say, Gary, about 2023. Thumbs up if people were aware of that in advance of Janet's presentation. Yeah, so that's really interesting as well, isn't it? Because that sounds like it's a really interesting, you know, it's a really important thing to get out, as you say, Gary. So something I think for us all to be thinking about, given that bit of feedback there. But Janet, would you like to say something
about the 2023?
Yeah, any kind of, I think Gary was just looking for some sort of any suggestions, and I would think not just from yourself as well, Janet, but those on the call tonight about, you know, how we can ramp up momentum around all of that.
I think just to sum up what I said, Janet, it was just how we keep it relevant for the last couple of years.
I think that's up. I personally think it's just up to all of us who are active in clubs to keep it on the agenda. You know, we can. There's lots of information that we can keep in front of our clubs and keep just trying to ensure that we give to our own charities as well as to other charities. It's a relatively simple message, but it's a task for all presidents and presidents-elect to have on their agenda, to keep it in front of their club and make sure clubs are well informed, so they're not being asked to give money to things that they don't understand. I think you're right that information is essential. Clubs need to be well informed.
And also all of us being effective advocates. Yeah. I think so people can see it as something relevant to what they're doing as Rotarians at local level and in clubs as well. And I'm not sure that sometimes we're as good at promoting that as we perhaps are about other charities and other causes, and given the investment that we've made in so many ways and not just financial. Thanks, Janet. Philip, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, sort of going back to the donation theme. If I was to donate through the Rotary website or the My Rotary website, does my donation get credited against the club's record for towards the $100 per head, for example, or does it have to go through the club secretary to do that?
Right, so all donations to Foundation and End Polio Now should go to Rotary Foundation UK, which is housed alongside Rotary in Britain and Ireland in Ulster. The reason for that is that RF UK, being a British charity, can claim gift aid on the donations if they're from individuals who pay tax. So that's important because obviously it boosts the amount that we give very significantly when it comes from individuals. RF UK will then transmit that information electronically to Rotary International, and it will go into their records, and it will go into the records of any individual Rotarians who are named in the paperwork, or it will go against the club. And that information is readily available. As someone said earlier, if you're an individual, you can see your individual donations. The club officers can see the club donations. So it is all very transparent.
So
it goes to RF UK, not directly to Rotary International.
Yes, I'm really thinking of the my.rotary.org page. When I log in, and it knows who I am, it's got all the information. I just wondered whether that information is going to RF UK and therefore doing what you suggest there, or whether it has to go through some other site.
No, it's all linked up. If you put in the money through RF UK, then you will see it in your record in My Rotary.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks. Jim, you wanted to come in with a question?
Yeah, well, not a question, just a fact. This is where I think that we need to engage with someone who has positive links to the media. You ones probably won't know of our local radio station, which is Waves, but I contacted them and had them to announce that the 24th of October was National Polio Day for Rotary, and that Rotary clubs all over the Northeast, including Aberdeen, were doing things, and they should have a look at what's being done. And the sort of avenue to that was whatever they saw in purple. And it seems to work.
Good.
Thanks, Jim. And Alistair?
Hi, thanks again. Gary raised a couple of points and somebody else did as well. If you can see what's in my hand, if you're on gallery, sustained giving, there's a document available from Rotary, and you can pay in a set amount each month, and you're kept up to date with it, and you can track it throughout the rest of your life while your money is doing good. And that's purely for the polio campaign. So please take advantage of that. Some of our club have done. The other thing I wanted to do was say that I was privileged about 15 months ago to be down at the House of Commons with Judith Dimmitt to talk about polio with people from all over the world, a huge number of Rotarians. And one of the things that was promised when we came out of that was that there would be the promotional material, whether it was videos, things on television, YouTube and so on, would be being produced to help us do exactly what Gary was asking. Things that we could show to the general public and help our fundraising efforts and help get the message through to young people who don't really know what polio is about. I'm disappointed to say that I'm still waiting to see it, but maybe others have seen it and I've missed it.
I don't know if that's something you can comment on, Janet, or others.
There's a whole series of videos on YouTube that I use when I'm speaking to primary schools. I'm not sure if Alistair's aware of those. There's loads of them. There's ones that have been created by the World Health Organization and also some that have been created by RIBI. So there are videos available. We need more and better, but then, you know, there's always a balance between what you need and what you can afford. And
yeah, they may be around, but it's how do we find out about them? Was the link?
Alistair, go on YouTube and just search on polio. There are.
Yeah. I will ask somebody to do that because I'm a numpty on IT.
There's also the Rotary International has a dedicated channel on YouTube, and so do RGB and I.
But certainly there are videos on there that I use in primary schools.
Yeah, right. there are some really good ones. There are some really good ones out there already. I don't know the specific resources.
There's also a couple of very good ones where Adi Adepitan is speaking and Connie Hook is speaking. Yeah. And those, I've used those with primary schools as well, because they recognise those two characters. So there are things there.
Yeah, they're very recognisable. I know he's been a great advocate, hasn't he?
Adi Adepitan, yeah.
Yeah, for just kind of raising the whole, because
he was born in Nigeria, so he's been very upfront on the publicity around Polio Free Africa.
Yeah. Gordon Hepburn.
Yeah. Just a wee bit confused, and I'm going back 2-3 years when our club was making annual donation to foundation. We automatically assumed that some of that would go automatically to End Polio Now. We then, 18 months ago, discovered that we needed to make split donations. And then from your presentation tonight, you've talked about the money going to End Polio Now from clubs and the money going to End Polio Now from foundation. So basically my comment is, what is the best route to make sure the money is ring fenced for End Polio Now?
Okay, I'm sorry if I was confusing about that. The money is all accounted for under foundation. Rotary Foundation is an international charity, and all funds going to foundation and for End Polio Now are accounted for by the charity. But they are two separate ring-fenced funds within the overall charity. So when you make a donation to the Rotary Foundation, to Rotary Foundation UK, you need to specify whether you want it to go to foundation generally for humanitarian projects, or whether you want it to go to End Polio Now. And you do that in two ways. If you send a check you must send a form accompanying the check. It's available on district website or on the RIBI website, and you tick the box where you want the money to go. If you make a bank transfer to RFUK, then you need to say in the reference whether you want it to go to the annual fund or whether you want it to go to End Polio Now. And again, there is a document which explains very clearly how you make that reference, how you reference your club and where you want the money to go. So if you don't do that, then it's very difficult for Rotary Foundation to know what you want done with the money. So just again to summarize, make sure when you send money to Foundation, you make it clear whether you want it to go to the annual fund for projects or whether you want it to go to End Polio Now. And there are the two very clear and specific ways of doing that, either through a paper form or through the reference that you submit when you make a BACS transfer. Is that clear enough? I can send you the paperwork if you email me.
Great. Thanks, Janet. I thought that was really clear. Was that clear for everybody else? Yeah.
Thank you. The paper
no, great.
on the district website and on the RIBI website, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's great. I don't think a discussion about polio would be complete without the mention of pants, Alana, would it? Tell us about your
Sorry,
pants.
I had to unmute myself. Sorry, my internet kept going down there, or I would have chipped in earlier. Yeah, no, we do. It's harder this year because obviously it works better in a public place with loads of people, when obviously we're restricted to that. But obviously last year at conference, my club all wore pants, purple pants on top of our trousers with the branding on the bum. And we, just to raise awareness, because people would stare at you, people were looking at you like you couldn't miss us. And they would come and ask, and it gave us an opportunity to speak to them about it, to tell them to get donations and stuff. And we also made our own mints, and we called them, instead of polo mints, we called them polio mints, and we sell them to the public, and we also sell them to other clubs if they want them. And we have them again in little tubs with the branding on the top, and we made some key rings, little bears, we made fridge magnets, all different stuff with the branding on it that was purple, in order to raise funds. We sell them to clubs in the areas next to us. We're trying to expand it eventually, but the areas on either, like, so we're area 8, so I think it's area 6 and 7, we sell them to, so that they can sell them from their club, so that they can put the money to polio from their own club. We also just run a Halloween competition as well, because obviously we couldn't do our parties. So as well as our normal Halloween competition for the kids, we did a fancy dress for the adults. For Rotarians, it was £5 per head. We haven't announced the winner yet, but when the winner is announced, the club who won that will get the money to send polio from their own club. So that's what we're doing, to try and keep everybody speaking about it, keep it known, keep it out there, put it on our agenda, on our meetings quite regularly to speak about, because Janet's right, we need to keep talking about it, we need to keep reminding our members and reminding the public about it as well.
Thanks, Alana. And I thought what was really interesting as well is just some of the examples that you were given. It's sort of a reminder that these ideas, there's not these ideas can pop up from anywhere, can't they? And a lot of it's just about the branding and about the awareness. Yeah. But I like what you were saying as well about the partnerships that you're building across other clubs. Because
yeah,
definitely smaller clubs where capacity might be an issue, but these links and these opportunities are out there. You don't have to be doing everything by yourself. But yeah, I think you make the point really clearly that this is about raising awareness and talking about it in ways that people can actually engage with it and understand the relevance of it, and no better opportunity than now in terms of how close we are, but also people understanding what it feels like to be in the grip of a pandemic as well.
Definitely. And I think having things like that make the public, rather than just Rotarians, like Rotarians know so much about polio, but it's trying to get over to the non-Rotarians, and you kind of need stuff that's in their face a bit, stuff that will make them come and ask you instead of you putting it on them, because sometimes they don't want to hear it. They don't want you to be at them nipping their head. But if you do something where they come over and are like, why are you wearing pants on top of your trousers? Then it's a perfect opportunity to tell them about it.
It's definitely one way to go. Hands up, who's going to be wearing their pants outside their trousers for polio after this evening? Oh, Lana, you'll never believe it, but there wasn't an awful lot of hands went up, but I'm sure people are away to think of a version of that they are definitely comfortable with.
We'll get them involved some way. We'll get them involved some way.
Heather.
Yep.
Robin Water Forfer. Just that reminded me that we have Bumashana Hill with the monument on the top of it, and last year we actually illuminated it purple.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
But we were going to do it this year again, but there's a bit of complications with the management of that, so we haven't done it again this year. But that we did that last year.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it's a bit like Alana's saying, you know, lighten up the buildings and so on. You know, like I know Janet's club lit up Carnegie Hall and Dunfermline, and I know one of the other theatres in Fife was lit up, and that's really worth doing. The opportunities then got to be grasped about telling people what that's all about then, isn't it? And getting that as a talking point and in the press, a bit like Jim was talking about earlier. So yeah, well look, thanks folks for such a great discussion. I know we're always really quite strict about keeping ourselves to time in these meetings, not least of all because people have other things to go to, but also, I don't know about you, but Monday's sometimes tough enough to get through without extending the day any longer. However, I never come along here and not enjoy it and not find something useful from it and learn something from it, and I hope you all feel the same. And tonight was absolutely made, of course, by the range of issues that Janet covered and our usual passion and enthusiasm and commitment to Foundation and End Polio Now. And so I would invite you to show your appreciation for Janet, please. Thank you before we end tonight. Really great, Janet. You got some tough questions there as well. Some of them were right in there. So much appreciated in terms of everybody's contribution. That was absolutely fantastic. And what I would invite you to do as you go away from the forum tonight, there will be the recording, there will be the saved chat. Please use those if you can to do exactly what we've talked about, to raise awareness, have the discussions in your club, have the discussions with fellow Rotarians, have the discussion, as Alana says, with non-Rotarians. Let's get the message out there to get everybody helping us along that to the end of that journey, particularly around End Polio Now. And I would also invite you to think, what is the one thing that you can take away from tonight, the one idea, the one action, the one thing that you're going to go and reflect on. Bill, you look like you want the final word, so I'll give it to you.
Yeah, Heather, thanks Janet for your skill and knowledge. I've always known you are very clued up in Foundation. I used to be the district Foundation 20 years ago and things changed a lot. I'll take the question, I'm taking advantage to ask a question to all the clubs. I have in my garage a pile of shoeboxes because I'm the club collector. And at the moment, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with them. I spoke to Ron McHale for the Aberdeen collection, and he says something will be arranged, but it's next Monday. That's why I'm waving to you guys today. Hopefully, by the time we sit down next week, I've got my shoeboxes. So I wondered if anybody else has got arrangements for the shoeboxes.
Yeah,
okay, Yolanda?
All our shoeboxes are being collected this week, and they're going to Perth on the 9th, which is next Monday.
Yolanda, where have we to take them to in Perth, please?
No, that's a question.
I'll email you. I'll send you a message.
Okay, yeah, do that.
Save people's time.
I was wondering about the Aberdeen area, folks.
Alistair Walker, do you want to take that away and find out? Would that be okay to give you that
Yes.
as an AG job, yeah?
Yes, I'll see what I can find out, Heather.
So Alistair Walker,
Okay, thank you.
I'll take that away for you. Thanks very much. The one thing, remember folks, that you can do, and thanks very much tonight for another great discussion. Stay safe. See you next week, I hope.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good.
night.
Bye. Heather, while you're there, Thursday's all right.
You're okay for Thursday, Jim, yeah?
I'm okay for Thursday.
Right, well, I've sent the Zoom link round, so it'll be you, me and Alistair. That would be great. Thanks so
Okay.
much. Okay, good night.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.
Bye, Yolanda. Nice to see
Bye.
you.
Cheers.
Really nice to see you.
I'm trying to.